She didn't get colder because she stopped caring. She got colder because caring started to scare her more than losing you. Listen carefully, because this is where most men misunderstand women and destroy their own leverage without even realizing it. When a woman suddenly pulls back, replies slower, stops initiating, or treats you with a quiet distance that feels sharp and personal, your instinct tells you something is wrong. Your mind rushes to worst-case conclusions. You assume you're being replaced, forgotten, or tested. But female psychology doesn't work the way male fear imagines it does. Distance is not always disinterest. Sometimes distance is containment. It's restraint. It's control. Women don't go cold when they feel nothing. They go cold when they feel too much and don't trust where it's taking them. Emotional intensity makes women vulnerable before it makes them expressive. So when she senses that her thoughts keep circling back to you, when your presence starts affecting her mood, her sleep, her confidence, her sense of independence, something inside her quietly panics. And instead of leaning in like a man would, she pulls away to regain emotional balance. This is where the proof begins. A woman who is done with you doesn't create distance. She creates indifference. Indifference is light, careless, effortless. Distance is heavy. Distance requires energy. Distance requires discipline. It means she is actively managing herself around you. That alone should tell you something important. Here's the part no one teaches men. Women self-regulate attraction by withdrawing. When her emotions begin to deepen faster than her logic can justify, she steps back to see if the feeling fades. She wants to know if you're just a momentary spark or a lasting presence. And the irony is brutal. The more you chase during this phase, the more you confirm her fear that losing herself is inevitable. So she pulls further away. Cold behavior is often a boundary, not a verdict. She's trying to observe you from a distance to see who you really are when reassurance isn't guaranteed. She's watching how you handle uncertainty. She's watching whether your confidence collapses without constant validation. She's watching whether your masculinity is rooted in self-respect or dependent on her attention. And yes, while she's acting distant, she's also thinking, replaying conversations, analyzing moments, remembering how you made her feel without trying to impress her, wondering why your absence is louder than she expected, wondering why her body reacts before her mind catches up, wondering why she hasn't emotionally moved on, even though she told herself she would. If she truly didn't care, there would be no inner dialogue. No tension, no restraint, just silence. Emotional coldness with weight behind it is not emptiness, it's suppression. And suppression only exists where something powerful needs to be controlled. This is why the calm man becomes unforgettable and the anxious man becomes exhausting. One confirms her fear, the other disproves it. And right now, whether you realize it or not, she's silently deciding which one you are. Here's the uncomfortable truth most men never hear. When she becomes distant, she's not testing your worth. She's testing her own emotional control. A woman who feels herself slipping into attachment doesn't ask, "Do I like him?" She asks, "Why do I like him this much?" And that question unsettles her far more than your silence ever could. Female attraction doesn't grow in a straight line. It spirals. It intensifies privately before it shows publicly. So when she senses that her thoughts drift to you during quiet moments, when your absence disrupts her emotional rhythm, she doesn't interpret that as romance right away. She interprets it as risk. Risk to her independence, risk to her standards, risk to the image she has of herself as composed and self-directed. That's why she pulls back. Not to hurt you, not to manipulate you, but to see if the emotional wave passes when you're no longer close. She wants to know whether the desire fades or deepens in silence. And this is the part men misread as rejection. In reality, it's evaluation. Notice something important here. She didn't disappear. She didn't cut you off completely. She didn't close the door. She just stepped back enough to breathe. That alone tells you her mind hasn't moved on. People move away quickly from what they don't care about. They hesitate around what they're afraid to lose control over. While she's distant, her mind is busy creating meaning. She's wondering why your calm unsettles her. why you didn't chase, why you didn't demand reassurance, why you didn't panic. And those questions grow louder in silence. Mystery feeds attraction far more than presence ever could. When you stop trying to be understood, you become unforgettable. Here's the deeper psychology. Women are wired to feel attraction most strongly when emotion and uncertainty coexist. When everything is obvious, attraction stabilizes. When nothing is certain, attraction intensifies. Distance introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty forces her imagination to work overtime. She fills in the gaps with feeling. She attributes depth to you that words could never create. This is why restraint is powerful. Not coldness, not punishment. Restraint. You're not withdrawing to manipulate. You're staying centered in your own life. You're not trying to prove anything. And that quiet self-sufficiency signals something rare, emotional strength. It tells her you don't need her attention to exist, but you can choose her presence without losing yourself. And that creates tension inside her. Because now the story isn't about whether you want her, it's about why she wants you when you aren't asking for her. That reversal is where obsession begins. Not loud obsession, silent obsession. The kind that shows up when she's alone with her thoughts and can't explain why you're still there. She'll replay your tone, your timing, your confidence when things felt uncertain. She'll compare how she feels with you versus how she feels with men who try too hard. And that comparison rarely favors the man who chased. Distance sharpens contrast. And right now, whether she admits it or not, you've become the emotional reference point she didn't expect. Not because you pursued her relentlessly, but because you didn't collapse when she stepped back. That composure tells her something powerful. You are not driven by fear of loss. And that realization lingers far longer than any text ever could. What she's feeling now is something most women never talk about out loud, but almost all experience. The moment distance creates space, her mind doesn't relax. It tightens. Because absence doesn't erase emotional bonds, it exposes them. When you're no longer consistently present, her subconscious starts measuring the impact you had without distraction. And that's when the real attachment reveals itself. Here's the proof most men miss. If she's acting cold, but still watching, still aware, still subtly responsive, still affected by your presence or absence, then you're already inside her emotional landscape. Women don't monitor men they've emotionally released. They don't think about men they've neutralized. Attention follows importance, even when it's hidden behind restraint. She may tell herself she's just busy or needs space, but what she's really doing is trying to regain emotional authority. She wants to feel like she chose the distance, not like it was forced by her feelings. Because losing emotional control feels like weakness to her identity. And the more she values self-mastery, the more intense this inner conflict becomes. This is where men sabotage everything. They interpret her distance as a signal to explain, justify, chase, or emotionally overexpose. And the moment you do that, you shift the power dynamic. You turn her uncertainty into certainty. You answer questions she wasn't ready to ask out loud. And once certainty replaces curiosity, attraction begins to flatten. What keeps her thinking about you isn't your availability. It's your emotional consistency without dependence. You didn't disappear. You didn't punish. You simply remained grounded. That calm response creates a psychological contradiction for her. She expected your attention to increase when she pulled back. Instead, it stayed steady, and that confuses her narrative. Confusion, when paired with emotional safety, breeds fixation. Her mind starts looping. Why didn't he react the way other men do? Why doesn't his silence feel threatening, but instead heavy? Why does it feel like he's choosing, not waiting? Those questions don't get resolved quickly. They echo. And while she's outwardly distant, inwardly she's recalibrating how she sees you. Not as someone seeking validation, but as someone with internal direction. That shift matters more than compliments or reassurance ever could. Because women don't attach deeply to men who orbit them. They attach to men who stand at their own center. This is the silent test, not of patience, but of self-respect. She's watching whether you lose your frame when comfort is removed, whether your mood collapses without her attention, whether your life pauses while you wait. And when it doesn't, something in her reorients. She realizes your presence was a choice, not a dependency. That realization carries weight. It forces her to confront a deeper question. If he's not afraid of losing me, why does the thought of losing him feel uncomfortable? And that's the moment attraction shifts from optional to personal. Now understand this clearly. This doesn't mean she'll rush back emotionally. Women process internally before they act externally. Her distance may continue for a while, but her thoughts are no longer neutral. They're emotionally charged. You've become a reference point she measures others against, even unconsciously. And the more you remain composed, purposeful, and unreactive, the more her internal dialogue intensifies, because nothing is more unsettling and more attractive than a man who doesn't need reassurance to remain himself. That's the proof, not in what she says, not in how quickly she responds, but in the fact that your absence didn't weaken the bond, it activated it. Here's where the psychology turns uncomfortable for her and powerful for you. Distance doesn't just make her think about you, it forces her to confront why you matter. And that realization is rarely gentle. It disrupts the stories she tells herself about control, timing, and emotional independence. When a woman pulls away and expects you to chase, she's bracing for relief. Relief that her power is intact. Relief that she still dictates the emotional temperature. But when you don't react the way she predicted, the relief never comes. Instead, tension replaces it, and tension demands resolution. She begins to feel a subtle loss of authority over the situation, not because you took power, but because you didn't surrender it. You stayed steady. You didn't collapse into explanations or emotional bargaining. And now she's left with an unsettling realization. Her distance didn't weaken you. It revealed you. This is where her thoughts become nonlinear. She'll feel moments of calm followed by sudden emotional spikes. She'll feel fine 1 minute, then irritated the next, without knowing why. That irritation isn't anger at you. It's frustration with herself for being affected by someone who isn't trying to control her. Emotional autonomy matters deeply to women, and when it's challenged quietly, it creates internal resistance. She may rationalize. She may downplay you. She may convince herself she's just not in the right headspace. But none of those narratives stick for long because they don't explain the lingering pull. And when logic fails, emotion grows louder. Here's the truth few men understand. Women don't fear attachment itself. They fear attaching to the wrong dynamic. They fear losing themselves in something unstable, needy, or consuming. When you remain emotionally grounded, you represent something rare, a connection that doesn't demand self-sacrifice. And that makes her curious in a way that feels dangerous to her independence. Your restraint communicates boundaries without words. It tells her you value yourself enough not to beg, but you're present enough not to disappear. That balance is disarming. It removes her usual leverage. She can't provoke reassurance, and she can't label you as indifferent. So her mind keeps returning to you, trying to categorize something that refuses to fit her past patterns. This is why her coldness might sharpen before it softens. When internal conflict rises, behavior often becomes more controlled. She may appear more distant on the surface precisely because the pull underneath is growing stronger. Emotional pressure doesn't always leak out immediately. Sometimes it compresses, and during this compression, she's watching closely. How do you treat others? Do you stay warm without being available? Do you keep your standards intact? Do you live fully without signaling resentment? Every detail feeds her internal debate, and the man who wins that debate is never the one who argues his case out loud. What she's really deciding is this: does being close to you feel like losing power or gaining depth? And that answer forms quietly, over time, in the absence of pressure. So if you're wondering why her distance feels charged instead of empty, this is why. You've become an unresolved emotion in her life, a question mark she didn't plan for, and unresolved emotions don't fade easily. They demand closure, either through reconnection or through regret. And here's the part most men don't realize until it's too late. By not reacting, you've already influenced the outcome. Not by force, not by strategy, but by self-possession. And that's the one thing distance can't erase. Now comes the moment that decides everything, not for her, but for you. Because while she's been wrestling quietly with her emotions, the real question has been forming on your side of the silence. Will you stay rooted in who you are, or will you abandon yourself the moment uncertainty lasts too long? This is the truth no one tells men. Her distance was never meant to punish you. It was meant to protect her from feeling too deeply too fast. But what she discovered instead is something far more unsettling. You didn't fade when she stepped back. You didn't shrink. You didn't beg for clarity. And because of that, you grew in her mind. Attraction doesn't peak when a woman feels chased. It peaks when she feels chosen by a man who doesn't need her to feel whole. That's what's been haunting her thoughts. The realization that your attention isn't cheap, that your presence isn't guaranteed, that closeness with you is an invitation, not an entitlement. This is why, even now, you shouldn't rush to resolve the tension. Resolution feels good in the short term, but tension is where emotional truth reveals itself. If she moves closer again, it will be because she chose to, not because you convinced her. And that difference determines whether desire grows or dies slowly over time. Understand this clearly. If she truly didn't care, she wouldn't feel the need to be cold. She wouldn't regulate her behavior. She wouldn't monitor your reactions. She would simply move on without friction. The fact that things feel heavy, uncertain, and emotionally charged means something is still alive between you. But here's the final responsibility that falls on you. You must remain aligned with your own standards, not to win her back, not to prove anything, but because losing yourself for attention poisons attraction at its root. The man who becomes unforgettable is not the man who waits. It's the man who continues living fully, warmly, purposefully, whether she returns or not. And this is what creates the final psychological shift. When she senses that reconnecting with you won't cost you your center, she feels safe enough to lean in. When she senses that losing you is possible, but losing yourself isn't, desire stops feeling dangerous and starts feeling deliberate. She may reach out subtly. She may soften gradually. She may test the emotional temperature before stepping closer. Let her. You don't need to force the moment. Presence without pressure is the strongest position you can hold. Because the ultimate proof she's been thinking about you nonstop isn't dramatic confession or sudden intensity. It's this. She returns differently, more aware, more careful, more invested. Because now she knows something she didn't before. That your value doesn't rise and fall with her behavior. And whether she chooses to step back into your life or not, you walk away with something more important than certainty. You walk away intact, grounded, unshaken. That's the kind of man women remember long after the distance ends. Now let me ask you something personal. Answer honestly in the comments. If she never came back, would you still respect the way you handled this? If this message hit something real inside you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this right now.